What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Primetime Podcast. My name is Justin, and welcome to Primetime 21st Gaming. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. If you do subscribe, you're always going to be finding content because I'm always putting out content, whether it's gameplay, whether it's a review, or whether it's a new episode of the Primetime Podcast. So check out the other episodes. I've done one on the Tomb Raider franchise. I've done one on PlayStation 1 versus Nintendo 64, Xbox consoles, the death of Sega. You could go back and check out some other podcasts and really cool topics. But as for today, it's going to be the Resident Evil timeline. And I'm going to cover just Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, up to those. Those happen to be my favorite three. And who knows how many more parts of a podcast I would have to do if I were to cover every single Resident Evil. So I'm just going to be covering the timeline for Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. So, before we get started, just want to let everybody know that in the link in the description below, you can check out Catalyst Mints. They are the great sponsor of Primetime 21st Gaming and the Primetime Podcast. So go on there, check them out. Check out the energy mints, check out the energy powders, the shakers, the apparel. They've got everything, and it's very good content. They are great people over there, so go and check them out through the link in the description below. It's a win-win-win, a win for you, a win for me, and a win for them. So check that out. Catalyst Mints. Let's get started. Alright, so before I get started, I just want to let you know that if you want to see any of this stuff, you can actually go to the website called Resident Evil Recollections. It's actually pretty cool. It's got a lot of stuff on there you can check out. And this is where I've got all my information that I'm going to cover for the podcast. So definitely give that website a look if you're a fan. And I would assume you're a Resident Evil fan if you're listening to this podcast. But okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with the 1950s and the 60s. In the 1950s, what would become Raccoon City was a small rural town at the edge of Raccoon Forest. Modernization would begin in the late 1960s, immediately following the opening of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. So, the drug company known as Umbrella is founded in the late 1960s. We moved in November of 1967. The mansion and research lab are completed in the Arklay Mountains on the outskirts of Raccoon City. So this obviously is the mansion that you're exploring in Resident Evil 1. So it was completed in 1967. We moved to 1977, 10 years later. Albert Wesker and William Birkin are assigned to the training facility as prospective managers. On from there, July 1978, the training facility is closed. Wesker, Birkin, and the T-virus research are moved to the Arklay laboratory. When I say the Arklay laboratory, I'm obviously talking about the laboratory that is beneath the Spencer Mansion. But in 1991, Umbrella begins construction of a gigantic laboratory underneath Raccoon City. Spencer approves Birkin's G-Virus project, and the project begins. Now, when I say the G-Virus was a goal that William Birkin had to create G-Humans, a new superhuman species that maintained reproductive capabilities. And in 1993, Birkin is reassigned to the Raccoon Underground Laboratory. Which brings us to 1996. The Special Tactics Unit, STARS, is founded under the jurisdiction of the Raccoon Police Department. Wesker is appointed as captain. Albert Wesker was affiliated with Umbrella as one of their most promising researchers, but at the same time he was undercover as an RPD officer and the leader of STARS. So now we're going to start to see things like moving into Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. So I guess I should mention this will be covering Resident Evil 0 also, even though at the top I said 1, 2, and 3. But it definitely will be covering 0 as well. But anyway, just a little bit of 0. Just a little bit of 0. The Cerberus project began in early 1980s to explore the effectiveness in creating controllable bioorganic weapons. With the reliability of military animals, the Cerberus project began with Doberman Pinschers. The Arclay lab and the mansion trained the dogs in the courtyard to prove their effectiveness in taking orders. So in May 1998, a T-virus outbreak weakened the handlers' capacity to control the dogs, and they escaped after not being fed. The Cerebists claim their first victim. The dismembered body of a 20-year-old woman is discovered. A catastrophic viral leak occurs at the Arclay laboratory, and the laboratory is decimated. Okay, continuing on, we have a number of victims disappearing in the Arclay Mountains on the outskirts of Raccoon City, and the city intervenes by dispatching STARS to investigate. Now, this is where Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 start to take place. The STARS Bravo team helicopter is forced into an emergency landing in the Arclay Mountains due to a mysterious engine complication. This would be Resident Evil 0. The team investigates Umbrella's Elliptic Express and the former training facility. The training facility is eventually obliterated. STARS Alpha team is dispatched to search for the Bravo team. Now we're at Resident Evil 1. They are ultimately able to reach the mansion. Overrun by the virus, the Arclay laboratory and mansion are destroyed. Wesker escapes from the laboratory shortly before the explosion. The end of Resident Evil 1. 4 members of the STARS Alpha team, along with 1 of the Bravo team, survive. Nothing remains of the laboratory. This ends Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1. Now, the remaining members for the Alpha team would be Jill, Chris, Barry, and Brad. And I usually, when I play Resident Evil, and I'm talking the remake because, I don't know, ever since I've played the remake, I just can't go back and play that original classic one that I always played on PlayStation 1. I don't know, I'm in love with that remake, and it's beautiful, and it's one of my all-time favorite games. So I always play that one before anything. But I always play as Jill. I always have. I don't know, I'm not a big fan of the Chris, the story that Chris has. I like having Barry by my side at all times, and, well, not at all times. He does leave you quite a bit, but when you play as Jill, you can, you save Barry. Don't kill Barry. Come on, it doesn't follow the story. Save Barry, save Chris, and of course Brad comes and picks everybody up in the helicopter at the end. But if you play as Chris, Rebecca is the lonely Bravo team survivor. So she actually, at the end of Resident Evil 0, she's arriving at the mansion to meet Chris for his story in Resident Evil 1, if you choose Chris. But August 1998, having obtained information on the G-Virus, former STARS member Chris Redfield leaves for Europe. He openly declares his opposition to Umbrella. And around this time, Birkin completes the G-Virus. Now we're heading into Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, which are actually happening at the same time. So if you've played the games, you know that they merge between each other, and I'll get into that here in just a few. Alright, so on to September 1998, which happens to be a big month for Resident Evil. What happened in the Arclay Mountains is now coming to the city. So, carried by rats, the virus leaks from the laboratory and causes a biohazard throughout Raccoon City. A number of cases of cannibalism are reported in urban areas, and the events are covered by the media. The Raccoon Police Department is overwhelmed, and the chief of police descends into madness. The mayor flees the city, abandoning his daughter. The UBCS, Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasures Service, lands in Raccoon City and begins to evacuate the citizens. Jill Valentine, who has been investigating independently in Raccoon City, prepares to flee the city. Rookie police officer Leon S. Kennedy arrives in Raccoon City. Claire Redfield also arrives around the same time. So, Resident Evil 2, like I said, and Resident Evil 3 are happening at the same time. And it's kind of crazy, though, like how they never, Jill never runs into Leon, even though they both have been to the police station around the same time. The reason that we know Jill in Resident Evil 3 is at the police station before Leon is Jill, or Brad gets killed at the police station when Nemesis makes his first appearance. And then by the time Leon gets to the police department in Resident Evil 2, if you do the whole Easter egg thing where you don't pick up an item all the way from the beginning to the police station, you can find zombie Brad. So this leads us to knowing that the whole thing with Brad and Jill and Nemesis had happened before Leon gets to the police station. And things are weird because things are boarded up in Resident Evil 2 that aren't boarded up in Resident Evil 3 in the police station and stuff. So you do have that kind of stuff, but whatever. But Umbrella deploys its new BOW, the Nemesis T-Type, and it begins to hunt for former STARS members. This is why you can hear Nemesis, repeatedly saying STARS. Leon and Claire escape from Raccoon City, rescuing Birkin's daughter Sherry in the process. The U.S. Army intervenes, declaring martial law. UBCS survivors are taken advantage of by Umbrella Overseer Nikolai and perish in quick succession. The Raccoon City underground laboratory is destroyed. Jill defeats Nemesis. She escapes from Raccoon City with UBCS member Carlos. The U.S. government approves the extermination operation. Under direct orders of the President, Raccoon City is annihilated by a missile attack. So this is the end of Resident Evil 3 where, Jill and Carlos get out just in time. And depending upon your ending, Barry's the one flying the helicopter in the ending that I always like to get. And the Raccoon City underground laboratory is destroyed. Resident Evil 2. As a matter of fact, not just the laboratory, all of Raccoon City is destroyed. It is wiped off the map. So Leon and Sherry are placed under U.S. government protection. The U.S. intelligence agency headhunts Leon for a position as government agent. The U.S. government suspends Umbrella's business activities. Outraged by this decision, Umbrella sues the government. So that basically covers, the main parts of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, and just a little bit of 0. But, if you want, like I said, check this website out, Resident Evil Recollections. You can go on here and go through. Next would be Code Veronica, and on from there, so you can check out all that kind of stuff. Follows Claire when she meets back up with Chris, and it's really an awesome website, and you could really sit there. If you're a big fan of Resident Evil like I am, you can find yourself sitting there for quite a few hours looking through everything. It's really awesome. So I'm going to do some Q&As here before we wrap the podcast up. Had these sent in on Twitter. We've got Ollie6945 says, what kind of new Resident Evil game would you like to see? Me personally, it doesn't exactly have to be like Resident Evil 8. It can be like a spin-off one, kind of like, well, not spin-off, but a side Resident Evil, kind of like Revelations, stuff like that. But I would love to see how the police station, or what it looked like, how the police station fell when the outbreak was taking place. Like, how did how was that handled? Because when you get there as Leon or when you get there as Jill, the place is pretty much abandoned. Everybody's zombies. So I think it would be cool to play a game from inside the police station at the time of the outbreak happened. I just think that would be pretty cool, in my opinion. Kevin Yost. So why was Carlos a good guy from Umbrella? Not everybody. The UBCS survivors, uh, like I said, like I read, they were taken advantage of by the Umbrella Overseer Nikolai. So Nikolai was a bad guy, but they all weren't bad people. But the name Umbrella, it just got a bad rep after a while. Not everybody was bad. These guys, these guys came in to help evacuate the citizens from what was happening. So not everybody was bad from Umbrella. Reaper00, what is your least favorite Resident Evil game and why? I've been very vocal on this, and I usually say Resident Evil 5, just because Resident Evil 5 does not seem like Resident Evil to me. I'm not saying it's a bad game, but I think if you put a different title on it, that, I don't think it would have been as criticized. For some reason, 6, though, I noticed 6 gets a lot of criticism, and I've played Leon's story in 6, and I would definitely pick that over Resident Evil 5 any day. I don't know. The thing is, you go and you look at Resident Evil 4, which is a big fan favorite. I love 1, 2, and 3. 0 is it's okay. I'm not even a big fan of 0. But Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 are my favorite. I just love it. I love the story. I love the characters. But when you get into Resident Evil 4, it just did not feel like Resident Evil to me. And I know a lot of people love that game, but it's just not a Resident Evil game. And you go to, for example, the movies, the Resident Evil movies. When that first movie came out, it did big numbers for the box office. And if you watch that movie, there's a lot of action, like Matrix style, slow motion action fighting and stuff. And I think the problem was when they saw how good the movies were doing with that, they were like, oh, well, let's work this into the games. And that's what the games became. The games became action games. Like it lost its survival horror feel and all of that. And that's why I think I'm not a big fan of 4. I know the chainsaw guy in 4, he's a little scary, but I'm not really familiar with 4, so I can't really speak a whole lot on that. But 5, like I said, it's taking place. If I can remember right, there's a lot of daylight. There's, I don't know. It just didn't seem right to me. So, but that's what my 5 would be my least favorite. All right, let me get one more here. We've got LYAVR, and they ask, what is your favorite video game ending of all time? My favorite video game ending of all time. That is tough. I really got to think about that one. I do have one. I can think of one. I don't know if it's my favorite of all time, but I think it's pretty cool. The end of BioShock. And I know I think there's 2 endings. There's a good and a bad ending, and I believe it's the good ending. You have to save all the little sisters, and at the very end they like show where you saved all those little girls' lives. Now they can live normal lives. Like it shows them getting married. You see like the ring on their finger, and before that you even see them like getting handed their diplomas, whether if they're graduating for high school or college or whatever. Then, like I said, it shows their hand with the rings on them. They're getting married, and then at the very, very end, the last scene shows your hand, the character you play in BioShock, and it's him because of the chain tattoo on his wrist, and he's old, and you can see that he's dying in like a hospital bed, and all those little girls' hands, they're grown up now, are there holding your hand as you die. So it's like you were there for them, so after everything you did for them, they're there for your final breath. And I'm like, that is a really cool ending, in my opinion. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, that's definitely one of the best endings to a game that I like. It's satisfying, it's nice. But alright, that's going to do it, guys. I think that's going to do it for this Primetime podcast of the Resident Evil timeline 1, 2, and 3. Covered a little bit. If this does well, I may go beyond this. So let me know. check out the video. Like I said, I'll check out the views. We'll see how it does, and maybe it'll be another Primetime podcast episode. Now, you can go on Twitter and let me know what kind of podcast you'd like me to do. This was an idea that I had gotten. I did a podcast with a couple guys the other day. They podcast on Twitch live, and it's called the Safe Station Podcast. They do it only live, and I was on there. They had me on there talking Resident Evil. So this gave me the idea to come on my podcast, the Primetime Podcast, and cover some of the timeline events. So if you have an idea you'd like me to cover, let me know, and maybe I'll cover it in a future podcast. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't to Primetime 21st Gaming. Like I said, I'm always uploading content, whether it's gameplay, reviews, and the Primetime Podcast. So my name is Justin, and I'm signing off the Primetime Podcast. Thank you guys for listening.